welcome, Shalom Aleichem. Thank you for coming and participating today, learning, sharing.
Marvelous.
I want to begin the following way. My rabbi growing up, that's Philip Horowitz back in Cleveland. Kay is going to nod her head because she remembers Rabbi Horowitz. All right. Used to, before we would recite Mourner's Kaddish, he would say the following, and this is probably 99.5%
recorded.
Okay, 99.5% verbatim. Our loved ones whom we remember have entered the peace and bliss of life eternal. They still live on earth in the hearts of so many of us who cherish their memories. The beauty of their lives, their gifts to us, have become a loving blessing and a lasting benediction. Now, more than 60 years later, I still remember that word for word. And it has, throughout my life and throughout my career, it has given me a perspective that I try to remember when I bring comfort, when I bring to support to those who are in mourning. Emphasizing and recognizing and affirming the process of grieving, but also acknowledging that the memories that we do have become a lasting blessing and an eternal benediction for our lives. Okay, so I wanted to throw out that perspective in addition to introducing and welcoming Rabbi Ilan Glazer, who is our presenter and facilitator for this workshop today. Rabbi, and pardon me for those of you who are officially have yichus with Ilan, because you've heard this many times before. But Ilan serves as rabbi at Adat Chaim in Owings Mills, Maryland. He's the founder and director of Our Jewish Recovery, focusing on recovery from addiction and spiritual counseling support for those who are grieving. He is a storyteller. He's a musician. He and his wife, Sherry, live in Baltimore with their son, Rabbi Doron, and they honor the memory of their son, Shmaria Zichri. And for those who didn't know officially, he's Bobby and Jack's son-in-law. But that's secondary to the fact that he is a colleague, he is a friend, and he is knowledgeable and a caring and compassionate leader for what we're going to be talking about today. So Ilan is going to present most of the afternoon, and then Bunny Tarquinio, who I assume many of you know, is going to, as a grief counselor, is going to speak for a few moments. And I want to add one or two comments near the end. And then we have a closing ritual, actually, to mark the end of our time being together. So again, thank you all for being here. And I turn it over to Ilan. Would you like all of us to mute ourselves for the time being, Ilan, or keep available? Which way do you want to work it?
I'm fine with people being muted or unmuted. If there is any background noise going on in your neck of the woods, please do stay muted. And now that I'm a co-host, I have the power of the mute button, and I will use it as needed. But feel free to ask questions, raise your hand, your Zoom hand, or your actual hand, or put a question in the chat at any time, and we'll make sure that there's time, if not during, then certainly towards the end, to answer any questions. So I'm really honored to be here, and appreciate Bobby and Jack and Rabbi Norm and the committee for all the hard work to make this happen. Here's the question that that I spend a fair bit of time thinking about. What do we do with our sadness? What do we do with our sadness? Anyone here ever been sad? Anyone ever been
Yeah,
like overwhelmingly sad?
for sure.
Anyone ever feel like there's no place to go with your sadness? What do we do with it? Yeah, I think most of us, it's hard to be a human being today and not have a fair bit of sadness about the state of the world, the state of the country, what's happening in Israel and Gaza for way too long, poverty, homelessness, all sorts of things. What do we do with our sadness? We all have sadness, of course. Illness, death, moving, changing jobs, not getting the promotion, kids moving away, war, violence, and on and on and on and on and on and on and on. So what do we do with our sadness? So too often I will say that many of us, myself sometimes included, we don't want to spend time with our sadness because that doesn't sound like fun, does it? Of course not. So I do a lot of work around recovery from addiction in the Jewish community. And a lot of times addiction is about distracting ourselves from the things we don't want to feel. I don't want to feel sad, so let me drink, smoke, exercise, watch TV, gamble, whatever it is, so that I won't have to sit with the feeling of sadness. Anybody know anybody who might have turned to some form of that? I'm not asking you to say if it's you or not, but I think we've all met people who maybe don't know how to deal with sadness healthily. Most of us don't. There's a quote I learned at a recovery meeting a while ago that says, "Drinking is not the answer, but at least when I drink, I can forget the questions for a little while." Right? That's a lot about what addiction is. And of course, recovery is about finding actual answers and better questions to spend our time thinking about. So, why am I here with you? Because there has to be a better way to sitting with our sadness than just distracting ourselves. And so the other major half of my work life and my rabbi life is about grief and mourning and what do we do with our sadness? And what does it mean to grieve well? And what does Jewish wisdom have to say about any of this? And how do we hold ourselves and each other and our communities while we are in times of sadness? Some people specialize in weddings and b'nai mitzvah and the more fun side. And, the Holy One chose me to focus on the grief and mourning and the recovery from addiction piece, because I think all too often we don't talk about these. And when we don't talk about these, the people who have these challenges can't find the help that they need. And that's unfortunate. And we all grieve. So we may as well talk about it. A good friend of mine says, talking about sex won't get you pregnant. Talking about death won't kill you. And I think that that's true. I think that that's true. Even more than that, I will say that there is a tremendous amount we can learn. There's a tremendous amount we can learn. So I'm curious to know, we don't have time for everybody to go around and share what brings you here, but I'd love to see if anybody wants to put in the chat, is there a question that you have around grief, or what most interested you in coming here, other than I'm sure numerous phone calls you got from Bobby telling you that you had to come. I'm just guessing that might have happened. But that aside, right? And that was a joke. I'm curious, like what are your questions around grief and mourning? And if you put them in the chat, I'll try to weave in some thoughts as we go. So I come to this work for a couple of different ways. One of which is that my dad, Rabbi Melvin Glazer of blessed memory, was also a grief and mourning specialist. And he did a lot of work around grief in the Jewish community. He actually wrote his doctoral dissertation on the work of the Chevra Kadisha, the Jewish Burial Society, who traditionally helps prepare bodies for burial. And it's meant to be secret. You're not meant to know who's on the Chevra Kadisha unless you're a member of the Chevra Kadisha. And it's very holy work to wash the body, to offer prayers in those, after the soul has departed, but the body is still there. And it's a really holy encounter to be able to prepare a body for burial. And Dad ended up devoting much of his career. He was a synagogue rabbi for 44 years and 10 different shuls, but he spent a lot of time thinking and teaching about grief and training other communities on how to bring a Chevra Kadisha to their community. And it's lovely that many of those are still out there. He also wrote a couple books about grief and mourning and hosted a podcast, which I listened to. And so grief was kind of swimming in his work life for many years, and I feel like I've stepped into a lot of that. And then, as Rabbi Norm mentioned, a couple years ago, my wife and I we had a difficult fertility journey, and our son Shmaria Zichri was ultimately stillborn at 26 weeks. And that was as painful as you might imagine it to have been, and even more so. And if grief is one of those things that unless you've been in that experience, you can't know the worst of it. And that's a good thing, right? I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And interestingly enough, Jewish law says that if a baby hasn't been alive for 30 days, there is no obligation to do anything from a ritual perspective. You don't need to sit Shiva. You don't need to say Kaddish. You don't need to have a burial with eulogies. You don't need to do any of it, right? And I think that comes from a place where there were many stillbirths back in the day, and child loss was much more common then than it is today. It still happens to too many in the community today, but it was much more common back then before we had a better system of healthcare. So I think from a sense of not wanting to overburden families for whom this might happen regularly, the rabbi said, okay, it's not that our children aren't alive before 30 days, but we're not going to place the burden of grieving until 30 days in order to, I guess, protect some families from having to do this over and over and over again. Interestingly, some rabbis go so far as to say that in those cases, not only are we not obligated to do any of those things, but actually we shouldn't do any of those things. And we encountered that when we were going through it. And just for example, the Chevra Kadisha, there's one major Jewish funeral home in Baltimore. We have a very large Orthodox community, and the Orthodox Chevra Kadisha wouldn't do the ritual washing of our son Shmaria because they said he wasn't alive for 30 days, which is true, but it's also just because you can't, or just because you're not obligated, shouldn't mean that you don't. And so the questions that we had to think about were, well, how do we want to grieve? And what can help us, Jewishly and non-Jewishly, in a place where there's nothing required? What would be helpful for us to grieve? And ultimately what we decided was we wanted the washing of the body, which I did with a couple friends. We wanted a funeral. We wanted a week of Shiva. We wanted the 30 days. We wanted 11 months of saying Kaddish because we felt like we needed it more than anything else. Although traditionally saying Kaddish for 11 months only happens for immediate spouses and parents. Not even spouses, actually, just for parents. So I think we did stop saying Kaddish after 30 days, which is a very hard thing. So I've been thinking a lot in these last couple of years about how do we grieve well. What helped me a lot was music, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. So, what do you know about about how we mourn Jewishly? Feel free to jump in. What do you know about Jewish mourning customs? What do we do in times of death and following?
A yahrzeit candle.
Okay, so we light a yahrzeit candle on the anniversary of our loved one's death. That's true. That's true. Thank you, Martha. What else do we do?
Sit Shiva.
We sit Shiva traditionally for a week, starting with the day of the burial for a week. Many families today don't want to do a whole week of Shiva. They want to do 3 days or 1 day or no days. And I'm not here to judge. I think that Shiva has two main purposes. One is to force the family to all be in the same room together, to both to tell stories about the person who died, and also to ask the question, what does this family look like now that our loved one is no longer here? Right? There's kind of like a resetting of the table, and Shiva is very important. I see a couple things in the chat. Yeah, traditionally we cover our mirrors. Why do we cover our mirrors? Because we understand that when it comes to a place of grief and death, we don't need to be focused on our appearance. It doesn't matter how good our makeup is. It's like we don't wear makeup on Yom Kippur either, which is also considered a day of death and renewal, right? So we cover the mirrors, we tear our clothing, yeah, and still in many communities, mourners will sit on low stools. Right? It's a way of saying we can't just go about our normal everyday life. Why do we tear our clothes? As a physical sign that the fabric of our lives has torn itself apart. Now think about this for a moment, friends. How many shirts do you own in your closet?
A lot.
A lot. Right? Back in the day, our people didn't have the wardrobe that we have. It's a little bit obscene how many clothes most of us have, right? Also with the kids' toys, it's incredibly obscene, right? Like we live in a world of abundance, right? Our ancestors would have like 1 or 2, maybe 3 outfits. And when you tore your clothing, it was a sign for everybody to see during that week of Shiva that you're in a different kind of place. And then at the end of the week of Shiva, you could sew it back up. But imagine being able to look at somebody's shirt and see how many times their shirt has been ripped and sewn back together.
Oh my.
Right? A way of carrying the grief visually right in our clothing. Interesting. Interesting. We eat round foods traditionally at the Shiva meal, at the Shiva home. Yes, eggs and lentils and bagels. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right? All of these things I think can be helpful, right? And for me, they have been. My mother died when I was young. My father died 6 months after we got married 8 years ago. Our son died. I've had aunts and uncles and grandparents die, and ritual gives us something to say when we don't know what else to say. Ritual gives us things to say and things to do when we don't know what else to say or do, and that can be incredibly helpful. I took this past year, no, earlier this year actually, I did a 12-week class to become a certified grief educator with a wonderful guy named David Kessler. And one of the things he identified is that there are 6 needs of those who grieve. In order to grieve well, 6 things need to happen. Now, interestingly, I will say, one of the things I also learned from him is that all the things we spoke about, all of the rituals of Shiva and 30 days and traditionally not buying new clothes or cutting our hair for 30 days and not attending celebrations in the first year of mourning, though there are exceptions to that. But all of these rituals are very helpful. But those rituals of mourning are what we do on the outside. But the other question is, what do we do with our grief that we carry on the inside? So he noted that there are 6 things that grievers need, and I'll share my screen so we can see them. To have our pain be witnessed, to express our feelings, to release the burden of guilt, to be free of old wounds, to integrate the pain and the love, and to find meaning in love after loss. Interesting. Interesting. When I first saw this list, it helped me think about what's the work that we really do when it comes to supporting those who are in mourning in our community, right? How do we show up for others after a death? Bunny?
We listen. We listen.
We listen.
Grievers need to be heard. Their feelings need to be listened to, because grief is one of the things that is the most, makes the most people so uncomfortable to hear about someone and their loss. People don't know what to say. And grief, all the things you've been saying and the things on your list, Rabbi, they're very helpful, but they're intellectual, and grief is emotional. So people need to be heard. They need to be sad. They need to do the grief work, because until you do the grieving, you don't get through your grief. And that, that's kind of what I do in our grief group at Beth Shalom Temple Center.
Beautiful, beautiful.
We listen, we don't analyze, criticize, or judge. We just hear where everyone's coming from. And because I also am a certified grief recovery specialist, we have tools that I can help them get past the grieving. But there's no time frame. You know, people think, oh, we should be over this in a month, a year. No, that's not how it works. And the Jewish sages were so wise that they set up time frames for people to grieve, as you've talked about, you know, the burial, the Shiva, the year long, and the stone at the end of the year, if that's what they do. But there really is no time frame. Grief doesn't end after a certain period or a year.
Indeed. Thank you, Bunny. Marlis, I thought you had a hand.
Yeah, I think one of the problems with being in grief, and I lost my wife 14 months ago, and it's been extraordinarily difficult, as you can well imagine. My problem is that, as Bunny said, people don't know what to do and what to say, and in doing nothing, it is much more painful than if people will just kind of ignore your presence and not reach out to you. That's what's difficult. And I have found that it's in my grief difficult for me to reach out. So I am really happy that Beth Shalom, and Bunny in particular, has started a grief group so that there is a place for it. My grief isn't as it isn't as strong, but it's still real there all the time. And as she said, there's no time frame, but boy, I sure wish there were.
Wouldn't that be nice to just say, oh, I can just do these things and then I'll be done.
Yeah.
Right? That would be nice, but emotions don't quite work that way. They do sometimes, but we get to the end of the year or the 11 months of saying Kaddish, and then what do we do? Are we supposed to be done with our grieving? No. On the other hand, there is such a thing as grieving too much. And there are stories in the Talmud about if somebody is one of the things the rabbis suggested was that during the first 30 days after a loved one's death, the immediate family members should not go back to the cemetery after the funeral. Why? Because some people were trying to spend their entire day and their evening at the grave of their loved ones. Now, obviously, that is both beautiful and painful and incredibly sad on every level, right? And it's not that we don't want people to go visit their loved ones. It's just this question of, as my dad used to say, the secret of death is that we didn't die. We are still alive.
Mhm.
And the ultimate question is, how can we still live even with our broken hearts and even without the loved ones who we really wish were still here? Reb Norm.
Yeah, I also wanted to throw out that not only is the Jewish literature aware of, but I think all of us are also painfully aware that we're concerned of what others are going to say about our grieving. You know, in other words, oh, wait a minute, you know, this person who lost a spouse hasn't been to the cemetery yet. I guess they really didn't love her that much. Okay, you know, we're all aware of what others are going to think. Mayomru, you know, that's our phrase. Is, you know, what are others going to say about how we act? But ultimately, it's each and every one of us has to find our own comforting level without anyone saying, well, by 11 months you should be over it. We lost a child also, and that's something that you know, that Lynn, it's now 20 years, but Lynn says people who say, aren't you over it yet? You know, so we still have the memory of our son, but it's in a different perspective, thank God.
Yeah. Things can shift, but things will never be what they were. We don't get over our grief.
No, or anyone else's definition of it.
We can get through our grief, but we never get over our grief. We sort of learn how to grow around it. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote famously what became known as the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. But David Kessler, I studied with, was also one of her students, and they ended up writing some books together. One of his books came out, is called Finding Meaning, the 6th Stage of Grief. Right? It's not just accepting that the death happened, although that is incredibly important. It's also, what does this death mean in my life? What do I want this to mean in my life? Does it mean, oh, my loved one died, so God must hate me because God took my loved one from me? I hear a lot of people who say that.
Right.
I don't think God, you know, the High Holiday Liturgy might forgive me. I don't think God is deciding who should be in a car crash today and who should get cancer tomorrow. I don't think that's how it works. I don't think that's how it works. Right? But the question is, what is the meaning that we can give, and how can we honor our loved ones in such a way that we are still able to live without the overbearing burden of loss? That is the question for us to think about. And there's lots of different ways to do that. Some people journal, some people establish foundations in the memory of their loved ones. Some people say Kaddish for 11 months. Some people don't find the rituals and that all that helpful, and that's fine. We all have to find some ways of sort of capturing the love that we had and integrating it into our lives and allowing ourselves to keep living. because I don't think our loved ones would want us to be so bereft that we forget how to live. Now, I just want to add that I've officiated at probably, I don't know, 100 funerals or so in my life, and I've been to many Shiva homes. And while I think there is incredible wisdom about the week of Shiva and Jewish mourning traditions, what I've found a lot today is that most Jews don't know how to go into a Shiva home and be helpful. So what ends up happening? So what Marlis, you spoke about, it's true that a lot of people just feel like they don't know what to say, so they just don't say anything. And that leaves grievers feeling incredibly isolated and alone. You couldn't even come to Shiva? I didn't know what to say. Don't say anything, just come. Right? My grandfather of blessed memory used to say, if you would go to the funeral, go to the Shiva. And if you go to the sad things, then you go to the happy things too. Right? There's actually one of my favorite pieces of Jewish law is that when you are going into a Shiva home, you are not allowed to speak first.
Right.
And very few people know this law. And what ends up happening in too many homes is that nobody knows what to say. So they end up talking about the sports, the weather, the grandkids, and all the other, or, you know, who brought the best kugel for Shiva, or where did you get those bagels from, or whatever. That's not really what Shiva is for. Right? Our job when we want to comfort mourners, our first job is to show up. Our second job is to not talk. And to allow those who are in mourning to show us whether they want us to talk and how best we might help. And I will say that when we said Shiva for Shemaria, we had friends who drove in 2 hours each way to come give us a hug at Shiva. And I valued that a lot more than the people who came who wanted to say some version of, oh, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Let me tell you about when my loved ones died. I don't care about your loved one's death in this moment. Right? That's what we often do. We distract ourselves from being in the pain in the moment, thinking that we're empathizing, but really we're just distracting ourselves. And we forget that the best way to show up is to show up and be present and open and listen for whatever needs to happen, and to remember that it's not ours to fix. We can't fix anyone else's grief. We can't fix anyone else's pain. The best we can do is listen and remind people that we still love them. And if we can do that, halavai, that would be an incredible gift that every griever really needs, because what all these things are about is grief needs to be witnessed. It needs to be heard. Right? Grievers often need to tell the story of their loved one's death over and over and over again, because they're still trying to find meaning in it. Norm?
Yeah, Elon, I just, a little personal anecdote, personal on a communal basis. Some of the Beth Shalom Temple Center people might remember with a great deal of affection Dr. Helene Fields, who was a part of our community for many years. She was also a child psychologist and a specialist and a student of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and a student of how grandparents and grandchildren would relate to each other, especially in times of mourning one generation to the other. But I remember Helene, of blessed memory, saying specifically, what's the most important commandment? Because even the little kids, the little Kinderlach, what's the most important commandment in Jewish law is Shema Yisrael. Okay, just along with what you're saying. Okay, that if you don't need to have anything to say, just listen. Hear, O Israel. Just hear, and whichever way you want to spell it. To be here to be present or to hear and listen. It's the best advice, and it's the most important statement for participating in support for those who are mourning. And I say that in her name because it was her teaching.
Beautiful, beautiful. There's a couple more pieces that we want to do, but Norm, maybe you and Bunny wanna go now, and then I'll come back.
Well, okay. My comments are going to be very practical. So Bunny, if you want to add anything at this point, please.
Well, I'd just like to say that I was delighted that you asked me if I would facilitate a grief group. And we actually started this, our first meeting was in March. And we're very welcoming. We have 6 ladies right now, and we love to have more people. You don't have to be Jewish to come to my grief group. It's open to anyone.
A lady either, right?
Pardon?
You don't have to be a lady either, right?
Oh, no, we would love, it's okay if you're not.
It's not women only. Okay.
I know it. It's very confidential. We're very relaxed. And not only do we listen, but there are tools that I share to help us move past our grief to be able to live our life fully. Because Jews are commanded to mourn so that they can live their life to the fullest. That means be happy and share the best gifts that they have with the world. So we're actually commanded to mourn and to get better, to be part of the world and share our gifts. And I keep asking the ladies, is this helpful? And they keep saying yes, and they keep coming back. And I asked them at their last, we only had a few people, but I asked 2 of them, what helped them coming to the grief group? And one lady said she was so relieved to hear that her mourning, her grieving started years ago, because when she got the diagnosis of her husband, and when he then went into a facility for many years, her grieving started years ago. And so when she came to the grief group, she wasn't in that intense grief like the other participants were. And when I said to her, well, your grieving started when you heard his diagnosis, and as he became more ill, and as you had to put him into the home and where he died, I said, I bet you're feeling relief. I said, that's okay. You get to be relieved. So there's a lot of conflicting emotions with grief. And another lady said, what was helpful to her was when she started doing a loss history graph, which I explained to our ladies, our participants, and showed them what it was. And it's when you identify losses in your life, because grief is accumulative. And she looked at all these losses that she had started to graph, and she realized, wow, I'm a survivor. She had a positive reaction because she had been through so many things, and that made her understand more why her grief was so intense with this loss, was because you really grieve all your losses. And losses aren't just deaths. They're moving, they're retirement, they're anything that changes your normal pattern of living on a day-to-day basis. So all of us experience loss in a more gentler form than death through our lives. But anyway, I would just love to have more people join us, but we're happy the way we are, and we'll just keep continuing. We meet twice a month, and we'll keep doing that. Thank you, Rabbi.
And anybody who's interested to just reach out to you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, okay.
Where we meet, which is in my home, and they can, and I'm happy to do one-on-one with anybody. Newly bereaved aren't really ready for this. They're in their own world. You know, their loved ones just passed, and they aren't on the planet yet. But I'm happy to do one-on-one with them, to just let them know that all these conflicting emotions they might be feeling are normal, and that we're there for them when they're ready to come to group, which is anytime.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And some people are grieving and it's like 5 years or more, and they still can't resolve their issues. And I can help them with that. We're welcoming people. You do not have to be just newly bereaved in the last year or so to join us.
But the conversations are, I mean, you said you don't have to be Jewish, but the understanding is that these conversations are in with a Jewish lens, let's say.
Yeah,
A Jewish-
absolutely. Yes, but the ladies who are not Jewish, they get just as much help as everybody else.
Great, appreciate. We really do appreciate your doing this. Bunny.
Thank you. I'm happy to do it, and I don't charge. There's never a charge for my service.
Okay, all right. So I wanted to just add a few comments, both general as well as very, very practical.
But
The general is to kind of confirm many of the things that that Elon has been saying, and things that I think some of you already know, even if you're not verbalizing them or articulating them officially. Judaism, as much as we always say, and we heard it again on Yom Kippur, uvacharta v'chayim, choose life. God says here, I place before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life. We always affirm life, but it's not to deny the reality of death. Again, a phrase that my Rabbi Horowitz used to say is death is part of life's economy. And so Judaism's approach to it is always a very realistic and respectful one, acknowledging. So when we talk about Shiva and that the family in mourning stays in their home, the importance, I guess, the imperative is not on you to stay in your home. It's on the community to bring this sense of comfort and support to you. So the community's worship service and davening, morning service, all come to the Shiva house, rather than the expectation that people will be leaving you to come to the synagogue. Okay, so that support can be as continuous and ongoing as possible. And then Elon also phrased it a little bit differently, but I think many of you have heard me say it either in classes or one-to-one discussion or from the Bima. Also, it is that Judaism and Jewish ritual and these customs and ceremonies that we talk about, I think Elon said it, that give us what to say when we don't know what to say. Yes, there are those formulas of comfort, formulas of blessing, et cetera, but it really is, it's all encompassing. It's more than that. It's the things that people put in the chat. It's what we wear. It's what we eat. It's what we do or don't do, so that every aspect of our lives is providing a response to those unarticulated questions of why did he die? Why did she suffer? Did I do something wrong? And any of those, could I have prevented this? All of those questions to which there really are no answers, but there are responses that help us cope and help us, and they affirm the need to deal with them, to answer them for ourselves, as opposed to finding them in some other source. Okay. I did just want to throw out what happens in a very practical sense. If a death occurs in our area, in Beth Shalom Temple Center, among our membership, among our families, et cetera, et cetera. The temple does have an arrangement with the Green Valley Mortuary and Cemetery for those who choose to use the local organization. They can provide any of the necessary support, whether a burial is going to take place locally or whether it involves shipping of the body back to Chicago or Detroit or Cleveland or New York or wherever, or even Israel or wherever it might be. There certainly are networks of funeral homes and mortuaries around the country, especially those that do have Jewish orientation. So immediately, the Green Valley people, if there's going to be transport or transfer of the body, the Green Valley people would be in touch with a funeral home of your choice in whatever community it's going to be. And if that's a Jewish family, a Jewish funeral home, the Green Valley people would be very, very respectful of the necessities that Jewish tradition imposes upon them. My experience in the last 6 years here is that many of our members are opting for cremation, which is a relatively new and, according to halacha, of course, it's not accepted, but it's in the normative Jewish community these days, it is much more accepted. And again, that can be provided for. Whether, again, there's going to be burial of the cremains here or at some other cemetery, in the home community or whatever it is, and we can lead through each step. There's an important aspect of what has to happen here, with two provisos, if you will. One is that I think most of you know, there's the tradition that a Jewish burial must take place as soon as possible, ideally within 24 hours. The reality of Southern Arizona is that rarely happens. And it's not just because it's Green Valley, in Tucson, or even in Phoenix and Scottsdale, where I've been involved with some families. The medical examiners take quite a long time to have all the paperwork done. And in matters where the medical examiner, where there are civil ordinances that will override the Jewish tradition of needing to be buried as soon as possible. Martha's correct that being an organ donor, or if there are family questions involved in that can also delay it. There's a principle in Jewish law, dina de malchuta dina, that in some of these issues we defer to the civil authorities. We still try to be as respectful as possible and have the burial take place as soon as possible, but there's an understanding that sometimes it can be 5-6 days even before the burial can take place. That's a sad reality of our day and age, but we try to talk it through, and they are as understanding as possible with that. There are basically in Tucson, there are 2 of the cemeteries and funeral homes that do provide with Chevra Kadisha and provide a more sacred space and more of the respectful and knowledgeable Jewish traditions with the burials. And that's the East Palms on Grant Road, which is near the Grant Road Costco, and also the Evergreen mortuary that's on Miracle Mile and Oracle. Those are the 2 that also have specific Jewish sections, and congregations have own property in those in those cemeteries. Martha's asking, does Beth Shalom temples? No, we do not have a Chevra Kadisha, a trained Chevra Kadisha. I'm led to believe that there were some people who are members anymore or even alive anymore, but where there were some people in the Beth Shalom community who had background of having served in Chevra Kadisha in previous communities. But to the best of my knowledge, there's no one in Green Valley or Beth Shalom Temple Center that is knowledgeable, trained, and comfortable with Chevra Kadisha procedures. But through Evergreen or East Palms, yes, the traditional community in Tucson can provide it. They can also provide what are called shomrim. Now, some of you know the word of a shomer, that we have someone who sits as a security guard for us in the building. But there's also the tradition that a Jewish body there should always be a Jewish person guarding the body, and so that the body is never left alone in that sense. And that can be provided again, not at Green Valley, but that can be provided through the traditional community in Tucson, up in at Evergreen or the Palms. So I wanted to mention those kind of things. The first call, obviously, once someone needs the support of the Jewish community, the first call obviously should be to me directly or to the temple, and they'll get in touch with me and we'll follow through. Or if I'm out of town, there's always another of the Tucson area rabbis who's kind of on call for us, and we'll respond as best and as completely as we can. Okay, so if there are specific questions, I'll be glad to answer them, not only now or at any time. And I will look back to Ilan for the next 5-10 minutes of how we want to continue and then conclude.
Thank you. So, it's interesting you were talking about the practice of having a shomer, someone who is there to watch over the body from the time of death through the time of burial. The sense is that we shouldn't ever leave anybody alone, because there's a sense that our loved one's soul is close by for the week of Shiva, and they should know that we are in mourning and we are respecting them. Some scholars think that this is a practice that dates back to the Middle Ages as a way to keep the rats away and to help avoid the spread of the Black Death. I'm sure not everybody agrees upon that, but it is interesting that what may have started in that vein has taken on another layer of meaning.
Or body snatchers, or
Oh.
So that's what I was going to mention next. Yeah. Actually, the practice of putting a stone on the grave marker. Back in the day, they would often reuse graves. And so putting a stone on the grave was a way of letting the cemetery and other people know, hey, don't mess with this grave. We're watching you. Right? Now, obviously, not everybody does that. We assume today that that's not an issue. But there's also something really lovely when we are at a cemetery to be able to place a stone on our grave marker to remind our loved ones and really to remind ourselves that the love we had with them is still here with us. I can't tell you whether our loved ones are looking down from above. I can't tell you. There's all sorts of Jewish traditions about what happens after we die. I will defer that to another conversation, and I am by no means an expert on that one, because nobody's died and come back and told me about it in such a way that makes sense. So we're all in for an adventure, whatever that happens. But the question is, can we hold death and life at the same time? From the minute we are born we are starting the process of dying. Every day, we read about people who are no longer here. We read about tragedies. We read about sadnesses. We experience sadness every day. We can try to not think about it, but if I tell you not to think about a pink elephant, what are you going to think about? A pink elephant, right? I'm not going to think about grief. I'm not going to think about sadness. I'm not going to be sad. I'm not going to be sad. Wait a minute. I'm spending all this time trying to not think about something that I'm clearly thinking about, but not trying to think about. Wouldn't it be better for us to just think about it and process and share and maybe even heal? I do think that would be better. So I wanna share two last things with you. And then I'm happy to stick around for some questions, comments, discussion. Absolutely. There's a great reading that I love that I will share my screen for. Now I know that you might expect that I am only going to share holy Jewish sources. And this, my friends, is from Mary Poppins, called The Place Where Lost Things Go. I often read this at unveilings. Do you ever lie awake at night, just between the dark and the morning light, searching for the things you used to know, looking for the place where the lost things go? Do you ever dream or reminisce, wondering where to find what you truly miss? Well, maybe all those things that you love so are waiting in the place where the lost things go. Memories you've shed, gone for good you feared, they're all around you still, though they've disappeared. Nothing's really left or lost without a trace, nothing's gone forever, only out of place. So maybe now the dish and my best spoon are playing hide and seek just behind the moon, waiting there until it's time to show. Spring is like that now, far beneath the snow, hiding in the place where the lost things go. Time to close your eyes so sleep can come around, for when you dream you'll find all that's lost is found. Maybe on the moon or maybe somewhere new, maybe all you're missing lives inside of you. So when you need her touch and loving gaze, gone but not forgotten is the perfect phrase. Smiling from a star that she makes glow, trust she's always there, watching as you grow. Find her, find him, find them in the place where the lost things go. Isn't that nice?
Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
So the tradition, when we are sitting next to a body working as a shomer, as a guard, is to recite psalms or other words of prayer as a way sort of in the merit of the deceased, and also, again, because we think that their soul is still close by, we want them to be comforted and know that we're, studying Torah still and studying Psalms and other texts in their name. So I'll just share, and I've done this practice, and there's something very, very holy about taking the 2 to 5 a.m. shift at the cemetery, or not at the cemetery, at the funeral home, knowing that you're the only one there with the body right in the next room. Right? There's something very holy, and death teaches us a lot about how to live. So just let me share my screen. The 23rd Psalm is one that is traditionally said at Jewish funerals and often read in these moments. A Psalm of David. God is my shepherd, I lack nothing. God makes me lie down in green pastures. God leads me to water in places of repose. God renews my life, guides me in right paths as befits God's name. And here's the important line, I think. Though I walk through a valley of deepest darkness, or a valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread a table for me in full view of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My drink is abundant. Surely only goodness and love shall be with me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in God's house for many long years. Why do we say this psalm at Jewish funerals? You can hear there's this sense of God does all these things for me, and sometimes we walk through times of deep darkness and sadness. And so the question is, can we envision that God is there with us in those moments, even in those moments of sadness? I'll share. I'm gonna end us with a song, and then I'm happy to stick around. And the song comes from that verse, Gam ki elech begei tzal mavet. Right? Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, lo irara ki ata imadi. I will not fear because I know that you are with me. So our son Shamaria's life came to an end after a difficult pregnancy, and we made a difficult choice to end things before they went further because his brain wasn't growing properly, and we wanted to spare him a short, miserable life. And we knew the procedure was scheduled for a Monday. This is January of 22. And 2 days before that, we were in Silver Spring. The son of one of Sherry's friends was having a bar mitzvah. And so it was an incredibly odd thing to go to a bar mitzvah 2 days before our son's journey with us was going to come to an end in the physical realm. And we stayed, it was actually at my younger brother and his wife at their synagogue. So we stayed with them, which was lovely. And I'm walking to shul with my younger brother that morning, and a melody for this verse, Gam ki elech begei tzal mavet, jumps into my head as we're walking to shul. And I am a musician, and it always amazes me when melodies emerge, and I do consider them gifts. And ultimately that and other melodies became part of an album of music that we put together in memory of our son. The album is called Gam ki elech, Turning Our Sorrows into Song. I'll put a link in the chat later on for it. And when this melody arrived, again, like I was just walking to synagogue, talking with my younger brother. And I like the melody came and I was like, wait, stop. We need to stop talking. I need to sing this melody. I need to remember this. This felt important. It felt like the Holy One telling me, Elon, what's going to happen is going to be terrible. It's going to be hard. It's going to be awful. Please remember that I am still here with you. I am still here walking with you in the dark places. So often when we experience the death of a loved one, we feel like we're alone. And this felt like a real gift from the Holy One. And other melodies came, and again, we put them into an album, and now, and I feel like these melodies were really a gift from our son. And so he's in these melodies, and this is one of the ways in which I find meaning. And I invite you, as we listen to the song, I'm gonna play for you the video of the album recording of this song, and I'm putting the transliteration in the chat for you so that you can sing along if you want. I want to invite you just to think about, how has the Holy One walked with you on your own journey of grief and mourning? And if there were a message that your grief was trying to teach you, what might it be? And if none of those questions resonate, that's fine too. You can just listen. And I want to invite us to think also about the fact that grief at its core is just love doing its hardest job. When we're grieving, we're actually loving. We're sad because the love that we had has to shift. But we can also be grateful for the love that we had and still have. So I'm gonna share my screen now, and Apologies for the video is a little bit, the cameraman was in the middle and he was spinning around quite a bit, but I invite you to close your eyes and sing along if you wish, or keep them open, whatever feels right. Can you hear?
Gam, 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 kiele, ege samave, gam, 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 kiele, ege samave. Gam, 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 kielech, begeit samavet. Gam, 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 kielech, begeit samavet. Out
Zoom. It's just about over. P.S.
That's quite lovely,
friends.
Elon. That's quite lovely.
Thank you. So I want to leave you with one thought, and I'll put a link in the chat. Then if Joe, if you can mute, that would be helpful. One of my favorite quotes is from Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel of blessed memory, who said, "There are only three ways to respond to sadness. The first is to cry out. The second is to sit in silence. And the third is to turn sorrow into song." May it be so for each of us, my friend. We all have grief. We all have sorrows. May we be able to turn them, to learn from them, to find our way home with them, and to turn our sorrow into song today and every day. Thank you so much for being with me today. It's an honor and a pleasure. And I'm sure that at some point our travels will take us out to Green Valley, and we'll be happy to meet you all again in person.
We will look forward to that, Elon. Thank you so much. And picking up on the words that are so meaningful, that you help show us and remind us that we walk through the valley of death. It's not an end for us. It's part of the path, and the path of life. And when we can walk through and find meaning, we truly appreciate your words, your music, and your soul. So thanks. Our best regards to Sherry as well. Thanks to Bobby and Jack for all the introductions, and thanks to all of you for being with us today. We will see you soon.
Rabbi, can I add one small thing?
Quick.
Elon is also the author of a book, And God Created Recovery. There is a copy someplace in our library at the Temple
Yes.
Center.
Mm-hmm.
I personally have the CD, to say the least. If there's a group of people that would like to order books and or CDs, I can get the information from Elon and get a group order together. I'll take delivery at our home here and then pass them out and collect money from everyone so as we know what's what. I'd be glad to do that if someone wants to borrow the CD or just listen to it. If there's anything at the temple coming up, I'd be glad to bring it in and listen to it. Or Bunny at one of your programs, one of your classes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks as well to Bunny. And again, if anybody's looking for information about her group or a private session, reach out to her directly or through me and all. Thanks all for being here today. We wish you well.